We are live on YouTube. If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing? I know, right? It's been a while.
Yeah, you were just. There's a few extra buttons here when you go live. You were just. You were touching up your appearance. Is that what I heard you were doing?
I'm gonna try.
There's a button for that.
It didn't really help. So, we decided to do this live today because today it's kind of one of those days at One Bills Drive where I think people would really appreciate, your perspective, the number of years you were there, some stories, some insights, as to what kind of happens today on what we're going to call Cutdown Day.
Yeah. First of all, I don't think we've been live since like the playoffs.
No, right? Would be since the Cincinnati game.
Yeah,
before then.
It's right. I was just thinking about that.
It's been a while.
But hey, whoever's joining us, thank you.
Yeah,
yes, Cutdown Day is upon us. Yeah,
maybe for people
deal,
who haven't heard us before or coming to us for the first time, can you describe to people what you did, what your role was with the team, and then we'll get into kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was with the organization for 27 years. 12 of them as director of football administration. Until 2017, and basically handle the administrative side for the football, the players, coaches, trainers. I handled contracts, I handled travel, and So
when it comes to contracts and it comes to Cutdown Day,
yeah,
take me into the building like the morning, like it's 8 a.m. Okay?
Well, yeah. Fortunately, every player, all 90 that were there, were under contract. So it's relevant because, the cuts are made with the, as Greg Thompson can really get into the weeds on, what, the players' compensation and the salary cap hit. If two players are considered equal in almost every way, and with all the variables, it's not easy to do. But that is a consideration.
Sure.
If you have a guy that's going to be less of a cap hit, you take that. So
when you were there under Rex, Shane Gailey, et cetera, was there like a large staff meeting the morning of Cutdown Day?
Yeah, the coaches, sometimes the scouting department was all in there because they had to act quickly. They had to call the agents for all the players that were cut. So when I was there, it was a 2-stage process. It went from 90 to 75 in week 3, and then from 75 players to 53 in week 4
of the preseason.
Yeah, and there's no sweeter sound than after that. Then it was 4 final preseason game, 3 now, whatever it is. Then that final gun on the last preseason game. For us, it was always either versus Detroit or at Detroit because Mr. Wilson had just lived in Detroit, and it was such a meaningless game, and you just watched and just wrang your hands that no one would get hurt. But there were some important players in the game that were battling for backup positions, and but when it was over, it was like, yes, here we go, all this work, and now the excitement of the regular season's coming. But it was also hard, and the deeper I got into football, the harder it was. And I mean, I guess in some ways I'm just kind of a softie, but you watch all these players and how hard, they worked for all the way, after the draft and minicamp and OTAs. And they know it's a cruel numbers game, but you get to know some of them, and frankly, you do root for some of them. And when they don't make it, you at least hope they showed enough in preseason games that they would get picked up by another team. But we had to act very, very quickly because those players that were cut, you had to have them clean out their locker, have a driver take them to the airport. They were gone because the head coach wanted to have the 53 in there. Usually, a lot of times it happened on a player's day off, but to notify everyone and start game planning for that,
right,
for the opener.
So let's take a step back. When there's 90 guys on the roster, and you're in a football meeting, a roster construction meeting, whatever, realistically, how many guys had no chance of making the roster?
If that happened, it already happened. You saw the Bills released 7 or 9 players yesterday.
Yes.
And the reason they do that is it's a benefit to them because
it's a courtesy, right?
It's a courtesy to do it early so that a couple things that you bring up there. You were crossing your fingers that they didn't get hurt in that final preseason game, or claiming they got hurt in that final preseason game, because if they did, if they sprained an MCL, that's a 3-week injury, 3 to 5 week injury, their agent would say, you're gonna put them on injured reserve, and you have to pay them for, they negotiate We think it's a 3-week injury.
So Shane Ray,
Mhm.
who was the first round pick out of Missouri, had played in the CFL for a while. He was kind of a reclamation project this offseason with the Bills. He comes in, he got hurt, and they just had an injury settlement and released him. Can you kind of explain to people and to me what an injury settlement looks like in a case like his?
Yeah, an injury settlement would be essentially a battle. I won't call it a war, but it's a battle between the team and either the general manager, in my case Jim Overdorf, did the negotiations in coordination with the trainers to look at precedent and say, this type of injury. Traditionally, what we're seeing with MRI and X-ray should be in the range of 3 to 5. The team will always say the lower amount because you would pay them while they have that status. The injury, the agent's going to say it's longer. Whatever you settle on, you pay them 1/17 or now 1/18, 1 week's
of their contract.
Of their contract. Yeah, or it's usually the down amount. There's an up and down amount. I know it's kind of confusing, but there's a level of salary that you negotiate. It's standard around the league that you pay them the injury amount.
Okay,
and it's like I think 60% of what the regular
because you
salary
cannot
is.
release a player while they're injured.
And you can't
without coming to some sort of settlement.
Yeah, so. That's a headache.
Did you ever feel like somebody kind of sandbagged it in the last preseason game if they knew they were going to get cut and claimed an injury?
I've heard that happened. Yeah, they were dealing with an ankle soreness, maybe a legit sprain, but something they played through with ice and tape all the way through, and adrenaline. And the last preseason game, we're probably, if we had to play, I can't play for 3 weeks. And wait a minute, you just played the other night, and
try to get a little payday on the way out the door.
Yeah, why not? And we've talked to some players that have been, that no worries about that whatsoever. But we talked to, you had a great conversation we had here with Drew Haddad, who every week would hope to not see 648-1800 come up on his phone because he was at that part of the roster where on again, off again. Then there's a practice squad, but then you have to hope that those 8 guys clear waivers for the other team. And then here's the pro personnel department. We had John Guy on, whoever's in that department. They and their staff are watching all the cuts on the board of all the 31 other teams at the same time. And there are players that, the other team wasn't a fit for them, or they didn't pan out for them, but because of whatever, maybe our team runs a 3-4 defense versus a 4-3. You're like, that's a guy, if he does get cut by that team, we loved him, we wanted to draft him, somebody jumped ahead of us. Our coaching staff knows him. Charlie Coiner, the tight ends coach, talked about, being unselfish, if having a player come in because he fits your scheme, even though he doesn't necessarily help your position. Those are all factors in those decisions. It's quite a day. It's exciting because here it comes, but it is quite a day for all those decisions that have to be made very quickly.
Okay, so let's go through the day. So it's you go to work, you go to work, what's coming. At that, when you were there, it was down to 75, going down to 53.
Yep.
But so basically they're at 75 now, close to it, having to go to 53, then plus the practice squad, etc. So take me through the day. So it's 10 a.m. Well, let's say the deadline's at 4 p.m. Okay. Did you ever have to contact players yourself? Was there a dedicated cut guy? Dennis Abraham was the cut guy when I was there, or the Turk, like they like to call him. Were the players in the building that day typically or not?
There was a little bit of fluctuation there because often during the regular season, for almost every team, Tuesday was the player day off. But in the preseason, if the team played a game, the final preseason game on a Thursday night, that Monday would be a day off. So a lot of times they're not in the building. They just have their phones. So, you mentioned Dennis Abraham. For us, it was Kevin Meegank, and for Mitch Reynolds, who is an intern for me, and he's now Andy Reid's right-hand man.
So what did these guys have to do?
They had to go to the locker room if they were there, try to contact them one way or another, either by calling them or having them in the locker room. Usually it was easier if the team scheduled like a workout to have them there, and basically tap them on the shoulder and tell them, coach wants to see you, bring your playbook.
Was there a schedule? So would the head coach and the GM just be up in their office for the day.
Yeah.
Now there wasn't it was basically who you could get when you could get them, right? It wasn't like this guy's 9:15, this guy's 9:30, this guy's 9:45. It was basically who you get whenever you get them.
That's a good question. And I think that might have varied for staffs, but in terms of a schedule of the cuts and whether they did it by positions, I think sometimes it was, but I don't know if it was that, down to the wire on 15-minute or 30-minute, increments, but they moved quickly, and the coach wanted to give, if they were still there at that point, they were legitimately considered to make the roster, and the head coach wanted to do them right by looking them in the eye and telling them, you had a good ride, wish you luck, but you're not a fit for our roster.
The guys who were candidates for the practice squad, they were usually told that while they were getting cut, correct?
They would say, look, we want you. You understand, if we can get you on our practice squad, we want to bring you back. You have to clear waivers. If you do, you can expect your agent to tell you that we're bringing you back we'll see at practice on Wednesday.
Do you remember any player taking it like really poorly?
During that time of year, I think they're almost kind of just numb. I mean, I remember players during the season getting cut because they had a bad performance. I mean, Langston Walker was an offensive tackle we had that was paid a lot of money. And I don't know, the offensive line was just, it kind of all in shambles. And he was shocked, and he came up to me to get his last paycheck or direct deposit. And he just, normally we would chit chat and talk a little bit. He had no part of it. He looked like he wanted to kill everyone that was in his path.
Really?
Oh yeah. He was really mad.
Were you ever in the room during cuts?
No, I was in my office ready to hear, basically, because I it affected my job too, which players we had to get set up.
Did you just terminate the contract? Like okay, yeah. So player X gets released, like the fourth string quarterback. He gets released at 11 a.m.
Right.
What did you have to do? Like what happens like mechanically with the league and the team?
Well, the scouting department, in coordination with me, I would have to prepare to do if they were going to be brought back to be on the practice squad or hoping to join the roster, because believe it or not, the cuts weren't over. They were very fluid, and a lot of times they bring a guy back for one practice, and it didn't work, and they'd want to bring another guy back. So we would set up kind of contracts that would be ready to go, except for what date they were. So meanwhile, the scouting department would have to send a memo to the league that I was copied on that would show every player that was being released, and then we knew what we were dealing with.
What was the team responsible for in terms of travel when a player was released?
Yeah, we would handle their travel back. They would. That was always a fun phone call. When a player was either we would reimburse them, tell them to send the receipts back to me, or we would just make a flight for them.
Was that league mandated? Like
Part of the CBA.
So you had to fly him in. You had to pay to fly him in and pay to fly him out?
Yeah, anything in between, though, if they wanted to leave on a week off, that was on them.
Okay.
The team policy, you could pay for more. Sometimes we'd pay for like 3 round trip tickets between, April and
depending on
September.
Who you were as a player.
Yeah,
right?
but then it got to be, is that a salary cap violation if you take care of too much for them? So the league kind of started to mandate that again too.
Okay. So when I was there, I sat up, near the head coach's
I was going to ask you all this time.
No.
You had a unique perspective.
Yeah,
there,
it was an awful day. Because a lot of the guys, I would say probably 50% of them knew it was coming, and there was almost like a relief because it's like when you're waiting to hear bad news, and then you hear the bad news, and the anticipation is sometimes worse than the actual bad news itself.
Right.
So there was almost like a sense of relief, like okay, I made it through camp, I'm not hurt. Maybe I'll catch on somewhere else. Maybe I played well. Maybe I put a lot of, good film together for people to look at. But I was up near, Coach Wade's office, and the guys would come up, have their meeting, and then they'd have to come back out and talk to Debbie Driscoll, and they would start making the flight arrangements. The scouting department was making the flight arrangements for them. Like what airport do you want to fly into?
Yep.
Some guys, it was like 2 days before they could get home because you're making like last minute flight arrangements here. And if they live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or somewhere in New Mexico, Buffalo is not JFK.
No.
So it was difficult. And some of the itineraries that I heard were just awful.
Yeah.
So it's like 10 a.m.
Yeah.
and they're not going to get home till like 3 a.m. or
Detroit,
or
Minnesota.
Yeah, 2 stops.
Yeah. Right.
Just awful.
Yeah.
So you guys had to handle like once the guys are told that they're let go, security get involved? Like how long do they have?
They're around. Security's around. I mean, yes, they don't have anything to do per se except to you just didn't want to have some loose cannon. The playbooks were real, whether they were eventually on tablets, but at some point, during my tenure, they were actually playbooks, and you had to make sure that you got them all back. That was sacred property,
right?
That is too. But the heavy lift was really for the scouting department, and I worked with them in coordination. I think maybe the toughest one I heard in my later years in 2015, it wasn't going to be announced till like 1 or something, but it was like 8:30, 9 in the morning, and one of the scouting guys came into my office and just looked at me and grabbed my pen and grabbed my notepad, and he wrote down the name. I could watch. He was like Fred Jackson. I'm like, oh no, really? He just had him. He was up there in age. He just had a really strong preseason. He was just so popular. We all love Fred, and I just remember thinking, I understand why. And then he got picked up by Seattle to play with Marlon shortly after that. I was glad for him, but
was that the toughest cut for you personally?
It was, for in the more recent years, yeah, that was a hard one to accept. But I mean, you got to get over it quickly. You just do, because got a season to play, and hey, these are our 53.
Do you remember what they call Black Monday when we released Bruce Thurman and Andre on the same day?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Do you remember that day?
I was in Atlanta. At the time, I was doing a lot of different administrative things. You'll appreciate this. It was maybe the last thing I ever did that had anything to do with the merchandise department before I was.
I remember you being there.
Okay, yeah. Before Tom Donahoe came, and I ended up going more into football because he realized, and then 5 years later, I would become director of player football administration. But I was in Atlanta, and I heard I was with Christy Wilson, Mr. Wilson's daughter. And she just looked like she saw a ghost. She's like, I don't know who, because it was, no Twitter or any X at the time or any social media. So I don't know. Someone must have called her. Yeah, and we released Thurman, Bruce, and Andre all in one day, and it was just like, wow, what an end of an era. How did that happen? Like, so quickly. It wasn't. If you remember, it was a Monday. That's impressive. In my head, I thought it was a Friday. I always called it Black Friday. It doesn't matter. It was on the same day. And are we powered up there?
Yeah, we're gonna be.
Hey, there we go.
Yep. Had to take a.
You're gonna find something interesting when you come back on right now.
That's the danger of live. You know what? Can you? Did you just check the plug here, bud?
No, I can see the light. We're good, but that noise went away.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's
was that out the whole time? Hey, this is live television.
Live YouTube.
Live whatever we're doing.
Live YouTube. This isn't TVs.
It went away, didn't it?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
So Fred Jackson, the trio in 2000. Give me some more of your like memorable guys who either got released or guys who maybe you expected to get released and didn't. And maybe do you remember somebody having just a crazy great reaction to making the squad?
Oh yeah. I would say a guy we're going to have on the program coming up the next couple of weeks, Jabari Greer.
Okay.
Was a cornerback from Tennessee. Had a really good year at Tennessee, but for whatever reason went undrafted, and he was just the nicest guy. Yes sir, no sir. It's Don. I didn't know if he had a chance. I heard when the Bills took him, they'll always say this, but they were surprised he wasn't drafted. Had a great showing, and in right away. And I think he was the fastest guy in the team. But could he play? He was undersized, and when he made it, I remember he came to my office like the next day. that's another thing too. If a guy was cut, I had to send them their direct deposit pay stub or their check. And when he came into my office after he had made the team for his pay, and I said, Jabari, congratulations. And I assumed everyone in the building had been congratulating him. Why wouldn't they?
Sure.
And they all started crying.
Really?
It's like, thank you. It is a big deal, right? I'm like, it's a huge deal.
So
you're undrafted.
Were you one of the first people that they would come to if they made the team? Because you were the pay guy.
Yeah.
You were the guy. Were you one of the first people they'd come to once they made the squad? If this was their first year on the team?
Yeah, depending on what day of the week it was, and usually it was always at the beginning of the week. So it probably just was more coincidental that it happened to be payday anyway. But a lot of those guys, when they were cut, I would not see them, and I would have to contact them to know where to send their pay.
We are joined by our guy Marlon Kerner. Hopefully
all right,
you can hear us, Marlon.
I can hear you both. Good morning.
Fantastic.
Good morning. We have a big announcement at the end of the show. We'll keep that for the cliffhanger. So Marlon, we're talking about Jabari Greer making the team. We were kind of just breaking down cut day from an administrative point of view, and from what I saw on the coaching side of things. Can you kind of take us through a cut day from a player's perspective?
Sure. I think, having been cut before, it's not a pleasant experience, right? Because I think Coach McDermott mentioned this yesterday is, everybody puts in the same amount of work. Everybody comes in, they work hard. They're trying to see how they can help this team and figure out what it looks like, knowing that only 53 guys are going to be here. And so it makes it very difficult because sometimes you get caught up in a salary cap situation. Sometimes it's just a numbers game. And so we always try to tell guys, and you always try to approach it as a player of, if not this team, then there's somebody else. So you want to make sure you play well in the preseason because you're auditioning not just for your current squad, but you're auditioning for the other teams throughout the league that are also looking to maybe add some quality depth or replace somebody because of an injury. But your mindset really going into it on this day is that there's a lot of nerves, right? Because you kind of know if you're in a bubble, you kind of know what it's going to be like. And so you're just kind of trying to steady the nerves that are there. You're hoping. Sometimes you wish that if they know they're not going to keep you, they make that decision quickly. So you can kind of then get your agent on the phone like, hey, they got rid of me. Let's start getting on the horn with other teams. But right now, guys are just kind of thinking like, all right, what does this look like? And so you're hoping you don't see a 716 phone number on your phone, right? Because once you see that, you already know what it is. So I grew up in the era where you had the big, thick 3-ring binders. And so you had to grab all your stuff and your notes and you had to bring it in. Now it's just get your iPad and your notes. And you're just kind of, like when you see that 716 phone number come up, you're like, all right, I know what this means. You grab all your stuff, you call your agent, say, hey, the Bills are releasing me. And then you kind of say, okay, they let me know. And then you kind of go from there. And you just kind of say, okay, what does this look like? For some guys, they may get the opportunity to resign and get put on the practice squad. So they'll tell you like, hey, hang around, stick around here. We want to add you on the practice squad. If you're a vet, you get to decide what you want to do. So you may say, I think I have an opportunity to go here and better my chances of getting some playing time. So you kind of just get nervous, but these are kind of those nerve-wracking days. I think back in Coach Levy's days, they allowed you to leave. So I always went back home to Columbus. Like I just got in my car, drove home, hung out for the weekend, and then we would have to come back and be ready for practice on a Monday. So because cut days were a little different back then. And so it was kind of like, all right, you ready to go? That's it. All right, I made the squad. Okay, great. I drive back that Sunday afternoon and get ready for Monday practice. If not, then you come back and pack up your apartment.
Yeah, that's tough. He made a lot of great points there, but you're right. If the practice squad, they would say, "Don't go. We're not going to send you home." Like that's kind of their word. It's honor.
Was there any like hard feelings like making the practice squad, Marlon? Like, do you know guys who were like, "Oh man, like I'm good enough to be on the practice squad, but I'm not good enough to be on the 53." Obviously, there's a huge difference in pay as well. Like, did guys view that as a lifeline? Did they view that as an insult? Like, how was the practice squad kind of like received from a player's point of view?
I think over the years has gotten received a lot more warmly as guys. I think back then your whole goal is to make, and even now your whole goal is to make the 53-man roster. But you understand there's only so many slots, and so I think you've seen enough guys that started on the practice squad and due to injuries or due to somebody's play or due to a trade, they get brought up at the practice squad and they make their mark, So I don't think you don't look at it in a negative way. I think now you look at it as it gives you the opportunity to be around an organization and get to learn it. So if you think, hey, you know what? Like I look at a guy like Lorenzo Alexander, for example, right? Somebody who came into the league as a defensive tackle, and then said, hey, you know what? I'm going to come in and figure out how to play linebacker. So that takes some time. So it allows you to kind of get in the same system. You kind of get to learn it. You're still getting coached. You still get to work. You get to practice and do all those things that you would do on a day-to-day basis. And you're getting better. And I think the whole goal is to get better on a daily basis. And so guys have a different approach to the practice squad. Yes, the money's a little different, but I mean, you're still getting paid. So it still beats the alternative of not being at this level.
Marlon, we're talking about your playing days, obviously, and you played in the 90s. But just to remind people that are listening, you also served in player engagement with the Bills. So what was that day like for you when you were made aware? Obviously, you were real close to the team. You were present in a locker room. Your office was right down there. And, you had official responsibilities that were directly, with the players. So when cuts happened and you were in that role, what was that like for you generally?
You get there early, just like players are. So normally on the cut day, we're like, okay, we're going to release. And the Bills always did it. I love the way they did it because it was always kind of like, here's our guys. We know we're not going to bring on and keep. And so they always did that cut early. And I think you saw that on the other day, right? Here's the guys we know we're not going to bring. Then you have the guys like, I'm torn. You're going to have all those meetings. So when we finally made that decision, we would come in early. So you'd have to be there by 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, getting ready. And they start making phone calls at 7. So you want to make sure you're ready. You're at the door. We had that list of guys that were going to get cut. And it was a scout or somebody would make that phone call and we'd meet them at the door. Just kind of like, all right, let me get your iPad. What else you need to clean out your locker? Hey, coach wants to, see you. And we would take everybody upstairs and put them in a room. So we would kind of try to help facilitate with that way. And then you just kind of cut those guys, like young guys, like, hey, if they tell you stick around. Hopefully nobody claims you off waivers. So it's because that always happens sometimes. And then if it's a vet, okay, hey, come see me when you had your conversation with coach and Brandon Bean, like, come see me. What are your plans? What are you going to do? Hey, let me tell you about some of these programs that you have that are going on. They had a really good program for some of the vets that you could get some training. So if you needed to go back and do some training, you can go to Exos and do that. So I would make sure guys knew what was the next steps that they could take advantage of some of those resources. Some guys are like, I'm good. I already got it lined up with my agent. I'm going here. I have a workout here. And I would just tell guys, stay in shape. You never know. I have a feeling I might see you again. So just stay in shape, keep working. Just because it's a no now doesn't mean it's a not never. And sometimes you see guys come back again later on in the season.
Did you feel like, Marlon, that it was helpful for the guys to have someone like you there, somebody who played, but then B, who went through the process as well of getting released?
It's helpful. I mean, but they're not really looking to you to kind of say, well, what should I do next? Like it's a tough feeling to go through that and get cut, and you understand it's a business. So I think for me, you just always try to remind guys like, hey, don't get down on yourself. It's not a knock against you. Sometimes you get caught up in a numbers game. Sometimes somebody just had a really good camp and there's no way that player is not going to make the squad. But, so you just got to stay focused and understand that this is part of the business. If you're going to stay in this business for a long time, you have to understand how to handle these types of situations, but always just stay ready. Like, don't get down. You can take a couple hours. You can take a day to kind of beat yourself. If you feel like you're going to beat yourself up, like, man, what did I do wrong? What could I have done different? You can ask those questions to the coach, like, what could I have done differently? But then from there, it's okay. Now let's get back to work. Like, let's go back, get to the gym, get back on a routine, stay in shape. Reach out, have your agent do his job. That's what you hire him for. Like, have him reach out and be prepared, because there's always, the Bills are one of the few teams that are always bringing guys in to work out. They're always looking to see how they can make their roster better. We'll turn over our practice squad a lot. Like, you'll see guys come and go there with that. So, that's what you always want to make sure you got to be ready, because when the opportunity comes, you have to be ready to take advantage of it. And you can't get caught up in wallowing in self-pity. Like, oh my gosh, I had a great opportunity and something went wrong. okay, it didn't work for you for this round, but that doesn't mean it's not now.
Do you feel like most of the guys knew it was coming?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, some guys, like, it's coming. Like, you can tell by the amount of times and the reps they give you. You can tell if there's if you got a first rounder in front of you and you're like, hey, this guy's a long shot to make the roster, then okay, you kind of know that. And then you always have those surprise cuts that you didn't see it coming. Like, right, like, I look at when we had to make the decision with LaShawn McCoy. Like, you weren't sure, you didn't know what's happening, and then all of a sudden you get the word through the building, like, hey, we made the decision to let go of LaShawn McCoy today. And so things like that happens, and sometimes you're privy to those conversations, sometimes you're not. And so you just kind of go and make the decision and try to help the guys that are there. I'm like, look, I can't help that a conversation. That's a conversation that he's going to have with Brandon Beane and Coach McDermott. And then you kind of go from there. But yeah, there's always going to be a surprise cut that you didn't anticipate. And then you have the ones that you're kind of like, yeah, he's a long shot of making this roster anyway, but he has a good shot of being on the practice squad.
Yeah, before you came on, Marlon, my surprise cut, at least the most recent one, was Fred Jackson. Someone wrote his name on my notepad, and I didn't see it coming. I knew he was up there in age, but I love your point about telling the guys to stay in shape, because it was funny. A lot of times, obviously injuries happen all the time, and you need to bring guys in right away, and all of a sudden you'd be in the building and you'd see a name come up, and see him in the cafeteria or come to your office, and it's like week 11, but it felt like they never left. It's just like, hey, good to see you again. I'm the drill. You know where to get you paid and what happens if you get hurt. So great to see you again. And so yeah, it goes that way.
I think people would be interested, Marlon, like when you say to a guy who gets released, stay in shape. So let's say a guy gets released, doesn't get picked up on a practice squad or another team, and they go home. What does that look like? Like, what do they do? Are they like going to like an LA Fitness every day? Like, what do these guys do to quote unquote stay in shape?
Yeah, I mean, some guys will go to LA Fitness. It just depends on what resources you have and where you are. So ideally, if you had the opportunity, you could go back to your university if they allowed you to use their facilities and work out there. So you see a lot of guys. Ohio State's pretty good about being able to bring guys back. You can use certain facilities certain times of the day, but it also depends on if it's in season, if it's out of season. So right now it's going to be tough for guys to kind of go back and use the facilities because it's college football season. So there, now you've really got to go ahead and get your own place to go work out. So now guys will find guys that have gyms. So you're going to go find your own, you're going to find a trainer. You're going to find somebody that can kind of keep you in shape, have you running drills. You're going to do your sprints, but you also got to work out and lift. So hopefully he has the facilities to do both. And if not, then, like look at locally. Like if there were sometimes guys that hang out here, like, and I would see and bump into guys that might've been on the practice squad that work out at Catalyst or back in the day when it was Gold's Gym. And so you kind of hit those places up and try to make sure to stay in shape. Guys will go, like if you're a punter, they may go to a high school that's not being used. So they may go early and just punt, or they may go after practice and kind of get their punts up. They have all their balls, they're kicking. And so you should do whatever you can to stay in shape and make sure you're ready. If you're a veteran, the NFLPA has kind of a free agency program where you can get up to 18 months paid at Exos, where you can go and get that same type of treatment. They'll give you workouts. You just got to pay for your room and board and your food. And so if you have the money to do that, some guys will take advantage of that and go there. So they know they're going to get the training. They have everything that you need. They're going to make sure you're there. They'll give you a plan of eat this, eat that. You just got to buy the food and take care of your room and board. And if you can't, then those are things you do on your own to make sure you're ready to go.
Yeah, that's part of staying in shape is the diet, right? It's
right.
Staying lean and
yeah. There's no chef carving you roast beef and turkey for lunch every day.
Right.
God, when I got let go, I didn't stay in shape. Nobody told me I needed to stay in shape. Administration shape. Wow, that's so. Where is that facility you were talking about for like NFL veterans?
They have a couple of locations. I think there's one in Florida. There's one in Arizona. And so some guys can go there. A lot of guys will go there when they get ready for the draft. They'll go to those two locations. They'll go train with a lot of other guys. Their agent sets it up. But they do have that program for guys. They call it the free agent wraparound program. And so I made sure guys had that. The NFLPA was pretty good about sending flyers. So I made sure that if it's a veteran, hey, just so you're aware, take care of this. If you have any questions, just give me a call.
Do you remember somebody who was like extremely excited that they did make the roster? We've been talking about the negative of today. Like, what? Give us some of the flip side of today.
So I remember walking in, standing in there, and Robert Foster, because he was kind of like speedy guy from Alabama, just kind of the people were like, all right, is he going to make this roster or not? And I remember when he made it, he looked at me and I'm like, hey, and he's looking like, okay, I didn't get the call. I'm like, yeah, you didn't get the call. You're on the roster. And he's like, what? And so, he's just like, oh my gosh. And he was, we had a great little moment right there just talking about those things. And I still talk to him to this day from time to time. Like I'll reach out and catch up with him and touch base. But that was just one of those really cool moments when you're in player engagement and you get to see a guy, he worked hard. He had some trouble with everything, but he really he had the off the field issues coming in, kind of like, well, is he going to make it? Then there was a question mark of could he pick up the playbook, but he did make the squad. And so that was really fun to watch him make it and kind of had that moment with him while he was like, I made it. Yes, you made it. You're on the team. And I think he ended up getting about what, this is a 6th year, 7th year going into it. So if he made a roster, well, he's on the bubble right now trying to decide if he's going to make that. But, somebody who you're like, all right, I hope he makes it and has a long career and it ended up not working out after a couple years with us. But, just somebody who I really enjoyed watching him make the squad that day.
It's like the scene in Rudy, right, where the defensive line coach tells Rudy that he made the team. He like jumps up and hugs him, and he's got his socks on, and he's coming out of the locker room, and he's like, "Yeah, I made the team." He's like, "All right, yeah, you made the team, kid. Get off of me."
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, what an amazing day though for these guys. It's like the culmination of their career, and
for
like,
sure,
what a great moment.
Another movie, that Invincible. When that Vince Papale made the team, and Dick Vermeil called him in his office, and Vince Papale just assumed he was being called in, told to bring his playbook, and he, thanks for the opportunity, coach. He slides the playbook, and Dick Vermeil just slides it right back at him. And he said, "No, you made it, but understand, this one's on me. I made the call to have you on the roster. So everything you've been doing in this practice, I need that every day." And I know it's Hollywood, but it's based off a real life situation. But a quick scene I always thought was well done.
Did you feel, Marlon, like once cuts were made, once the meeting room went from 90 to 53 plus practice squad, did the mood around the team change? Did the dynamic change? Obviously the regular season is going to start, so things ramp up anyways, but how did it feel as a player going from 90 guys in the locker room down to less than 60?
I think the first year is when you really get the acclimation period of what it looks like, because you're not sure. Coming from Ohio State, where you had 85 scholarship guys, and then you could balloon up to, I think you could have up to like 100, 110, 115 walk-ons on a roster. So I was used to a very big roster, a very big locker room. So you don't understand what that looks like as a player coming in until you go through it the first time. And so for me, it was like, oh my gosh, like, there's depth. And I think that's the first thing that you realize when the cut happens is, coming from college and then coming from having guys like, hey, I need a practice squad. Like, all right, you're here, you're in the depth chart here. Everything gets moved up. So, when you say scout team and you're like, I need a corner here and you need to make sure you give this type of look, from going to 90 to 53. Now you're the scout team. You're the guy that's giving a look. You're the guy who has to then go in and understand what it looks like. If you're giving a look on special teams, if you're giving a look on defense or offense, what your role and your responsibility is supposed to be. So as a guy who's on the practice squad or a guy giving that scout look as a backup, then it's like double the work. Because now all of a sudden you got to learn the playbook, you got to know everything, and understand you may not get that many reps as the week goes on. Like you may come in on Wednesday and get a few reps because the backup or the starter for whatever reason he may be dinged up, so they may be holding him out. So you may take all those reps and do all those things on both sides as a scout team player, and we went to K-gun, so it was always boom, 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 fast paced. You could go 15 plays in a row without getting a break. And then you may have to then go in and say, okay, hey, I've got to go over here and give a good look because this person's not practicing today, or they're getting held out of this drill, or they may be getting held out of this certain situation, a scenario for this practice today. And then understanding that all this work that you're doing, I got to be in shape. I've got to eat right. I've got to make sure I stay hydrated. And it may not even pay dividends for you to even play on a Sunday because you may not even be active that Sunday. And so you do this week in and week out. But that's the first thing that I noticed for me, as when they cut down to 53, it was like, oh gosh, like there's not that many bodies here. I'm the body. I'm the guy that's doing all those things. Like,
I'm the body.
And so you got to be in really, really great shape. And that was one of the things that we really tried to make sure in player engagement. We let guys know on the practice squad, you have to be in really great shape. So that's why it's important when guys get cut. I'm always telling guys, like, stay in shape, because when you come back, you're taking every rep on scout team. Like there's not that many people that's going to spell you. Like you're going to be the guy. And I think a guy like Christian Wade, he really learned that his first year when he came over, because he's like, man, like this is, yeah, you need to be in really great shape. And he was in great shape, but he's a guy who didn't come in and play football, and it's different. It's burst, stop, catch it. Oh, we got to redo that play over. So there's a lot of things that happen when you think about it that you're not aware of.
Wow. Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective, talking about the guys that just at a very base level are there to make practice as high intensity as they'll allow it, just to simulate game situations too. But
that's an interesting dynamic, especially you coming from like Ohio State, where there were always bodies, right?
Right.
Like there were 15 Rudies, on the roster, and there was just always bodies. And like you just eloquently said, you were the body. Like you were now the guy to run. Can you maybe tell people like what scout team is? Like what did you do on scout team?
So on the scout team, so what we try to do, and it was myself and Ken Irvin, and then I think we had Flamel Johnson my rookie year. So we always had some guys that could come in and do some things. So first thing we would do is I played defense. So we would go and then play defense for the scout team. So we go against the offense. And so we would always flip flop. So I always was the left corner. Ken was the right corner. So we'd flip flop. Okay, I'm going to play right corner. You're going to play left corner. So we can continue to work on our craft kind of to get better. Because your techniques are a little differently when you play left and right. You're gonna put your feet a little differently. The way you play man to man is gonna look a little differently as far as what hand you're gonna try to jam with if you're playing outside shade or inside shade from there. So we wanted to make sure we could do both sides, because you can't get in a game if somebody gets injured and say, hey, I need you to go in and play right corner. Well, coach, I didn't practice that all week, or I haven't practiced that. So we tried to make sure we would get better and work on technique. But then it's learning how they play their scheme, right? So every team has a different scheme of how they play it. Some teams play more zone, play cover 2, might play a Tampa 2 style. They may play up and play more press coverage. They may play more off. You may play at a different depth. So you have to then align yourself there and get there. And then understand, hey, when they do this is what you're supposed to do here. Like, nope, they don't play it like that. They're gonna jam, or they're gonna let me go outside and then turn. They may jump the short watching film. So you try to get all the tendencies, and your coach is gonna tell you like, hey, scout team, you need to do this. And they have cards drawn up like, you do this, and when we run this, I want you to jump this route. And you're like, okay. And so you do all those things that they're asking you to do, so you can give an accurate look, because what they've seen off the film. And when they drop the design of the offensive game plan, they're expecting the corner to do this in a certain situation. So you need to make sure you give that look so that they understand like, hey, this is going to be a really good play for us, or it's not going to be a good play for us. And so you can't go and just free will and say, well, I'm going to play it the way I would play it, because you're given a look of what the defense that you're facing that week is going to look like. And so sometimes it's going against your normal natural tendencies of, well, I wouldn't play it that way. Well, you're not supposed to play it the way you would play it, or the way we would play it. You're playing it the way the other team's playing it. So you have to put yourself in that mentality. Right. You watch a little bit of game film, like you'll watch film of them. Sometimes they'll bring in the scout team together. Hey, when they do this on punt team, they do this. When they do this on kickoff coverage, they do this. And so you're trying to really put yourself and really kind of gain and learn their tendencies so you can give an accurate look. But then also, you still have to be the backup. You're still like trying to take those mental reps, for the guy in front of you. Like, hey, if he goes down or something happens and he can't play, or, so it happens. A guy got sick and can't play Sunday of the game. All of a sudden you're like, I'm the guy. So you have to learn how to take mental reps, because you're not going to take a lot of physical reps as the week goes on, as it progresses. Like you're on the sideline just watching and making sure, I understand on third down, we do this. I understand on first down, we do this. Here's the tendencies on second down, they do this. When they get in this formation, we check to this and we do this, because they're most likely going to do that. And so it's a lot of like, you have to learn a lot of little things and little nuances on a weekly basis.
So your job description like totally changes after Cutdown Day.
Absolutely. Yes. It changes completely.
Yeah. We, in an interview coming up that we haven't released yet, we had a good conversation with IK and Impali, and we were talking about the fact that, he was listed as an outside linebacker and also as a DN going back and forth. So we had to go to 2 meeting rooms. And then it was like, he said, oh, by the way, then I had to play special teams. He never played special teams in college. So, he was just getting spread so thin. And trying to just stay focused and learn it all was just so challenging. But it's not just line up and play on Sunday. Is wow, what goes into it is amazing.
Before we go here, Marlon, can you maybe tell us your memories of the first year you made the team?
Good call here, yeah.
So the first year I made the team, it was crazy, right? Because I remember just getting drafted and not even having a clue that the Bills were going to draft me. And then you get to your first mini camp, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's Andre, there's Bruce, there's Thurman, right? So there's Jim, like you get the big fours here. You see all the guys, you're like, okay. And then we signed Bryce Pop. And I'm like, okay, I know who this guy is. Like, this is amazing. Cornelius Bennett was there. So I'm like sitting there, I'm starstruck. So we get to, and I remember how this progression went for me. And so we get to mini camp. And so we're there and we're practicing. And this is the first time where they were like, hey, vet is not, they're not required. Like it's a vet choice, but all the veterans were there. So that was kind of my first, like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I would see them here. And so I get into one-on-ones, and it's my first one-on-one. And Don, you remember we had Dick Roach as a coach, and Dick Roach had that mirror and roll technique that I had to learn. It's like my first time I learned this technique. And so I started picking it up, and he had the rule of if you can't learn this technique, you can't play for him. So I spent all the mini camp trying to learn this. And I remember my first one-on-one, Andre Reed did a stutter move, a toe drag, in the first 8 yards of a comeback. And I'm like, and so my first thing is like, I got to get out because he's going to go. And so that was the first thing I learned. Like his off the ball movement was so much more faster than what I had anticipated and what I'd seen on the collegiate level. I'm like, okay, this is different. And he ended up making a catch, and I kind of got turned around a little bit. And Dick Roach came to me and said, hey, that's okay, youngin. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. And he's done that to a lot of people. It's like, but you did a good job. You did this well. You did that well. You could do better here. Stay square. Do this. And so by the end of the mini camp, I had a lot more confidence. I remember Andre coming to me saying, hey, you had a really good mini camp. Like, we need you to be ready to go for when we come back for training camp. So that was more motivation for me to really make sure I stayed in shape, make sure I was ready to go. And then you come back to training camp, and then we sign more guys. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, we signed another corner. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just started trying to say, okay, I can't control the day. I'm just going to figure out what this looks like and just go have fun. I just have fun playing football. And then for us, it was like that last cut. And I remember, and they told us what to expect. Like Henry Jones, we had some really good veterans. So Henry Jones, Jeff Burris, Thomas Smith, those guys are like, okay, rookie, like you guys, we're going to need you. You're going to provide this depth for us. And so they let us know, like, this is what it's going to look like. Like, you're going to play this last preseason game. You're going to play the entire game. And so we played our last game of the preseason, and then it was like, okay, then you're going to go home. Like, take your time, go home, do whatever you need to do, whether that you sit in Buffalo. So for me, it was Columbus. Like, it was a short drive for me. So I drove home to Columbus and just kind of sat. And then you kind of wait, and you get the phone call of like, all right, am I not coming back? Am I staying? And then that you get the call like, hey, you're coming back. You made the roster. Come on back. Get up here. You got to go find an apartment by this date. We're going to give you all these things. And so from then I was like, okay, so I made the drive back to Columbus. That's that Sunday, drove back, ready to go, and was ready to go for meetings that Monday morning. You walk in, you're like, okay, this is a lot smaller of a locker room, a lot smaller crowd. And you're like, okay, what do I do next? And then from there, you're like, okay, I'm the scout team on this. I'm special teams. I'm on the scout team on this. I'm the scout team on defense here. And so for me, it was just kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then you're like, where do I fit? How do I play? Am I going to play a lot? I don't know. We were playing at Denver. So then that looked different for us. And I remember just everything leading up to the week, getting there, and they're like, okay, you're going to be our nickel back. So if they do this, we do this. So I knew I might play a little bit more. And I remember we did special teams practices at the end of practice. So we would go through our entire practice, do all those things, and then we would have special teams afterwards. So I had to stay like pretty much every practice, staying late for another 30 minutes. And I remember when I was practicing, we did a jam in one of our special teams drill, and I dislocated my ring finger. And I thought I broke it. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's the first game of the season and I'm not even gonna get to play. And I remember that's like shaking my finger, and literally like my finger is sideways, like it's pointing this way. And I remember I was just like, oh my gosh, like what's this gonna look like? And I'm like, I broke it. And Bud's like, Bud Carpenter says, no, you didn't break it. He's like, come here, let me see that. And I'm like, what? He's like, and he just popped it back in. He's like, oh, you're fine. Let's buddy tape this. So I go into the game, and my two fingers are like this, like they're literally buddy taped together. And we ended up losing that game like 10-7, but it was just like a crazy experience of all those things that you remember going into the first game of the season. But that was when I kind of realized, okay, I made a couple plays in that game, knocking a couple passes down by John Elway on some deep balls. And I think I tackled Terrell Davis, Hall of Fame running back, We both came in as rookies that year, and I remember seeing a play and making a tackle on him, and I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. I think I'm going to like playing at this level. This is kind of fun for me.
Fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Marlon, we also had you on today because you and I have a big announcement to make.
If I may, I want to tee this up for you guys because I'm proud of you both. I'm really excited about this. I mean, on our program coming up, we've got some good interviews, some players that Marlon played with and some others. But really, one of the reasons we wanted to do this live show is to talk about, we've been with the Cover One Network and
for a year now.
For a year, almost. Yeah, we started in September, joined Cover One about 6 weeks later, but through conversations you've had with the guys over at Cover One, and there's kind of a niche that you're filling that they haven't had, that people get real excited about. Marlon having played and you having been a big fan of this aspect of football, I'm going to pass it over to you, but I'm just really excited for people to get a listen. I'm excited to listen myself.
Well,
this,
thanks
so
for
go
being
ahead.
Don. You're our hype man for the show. You can be our hype man anytime. So we're gonna Marlon and I are debuting a show. We're gonna record our first episode tonight. It's gonna be called "What Happened on Saturday" with Marlon Kerner, and we're gonna focus.
Not that he just had a bowl of frosted flakes and he's going to mow the lawn or something. Yeah.
All right, you're fired as our hype man. So we're going to talk about college football, and we're going to take a little bit of a different angle, kind of like how our show does. We're going to talk to Marlon about his days at Ohio State. Unfortunately, Marlon is a proud Buckeye. We're going to talk. Yeah, there you go. OHIO. Yeah. So we're going to talk about his days at Ohio State. What's it like to be a college athlete? The differences between then and today. We're going to kind of mirror the Ohio State schedule as it goes throughout the year. Talking about playing at Indiana, playing at Michigan, playing at Happy Valley, which I know Marlon has shared is not Unhappy Valley. And then we're going to, and then me as a passionate Notre Dame fan, we're going to ramp up to September 23rd when my Irish are going to get revenge for last year against Ohio State and knock off the Buckeyes. But I'm really super excited about this. I know we're going to have some guests on talking some college football, and we're just going to do kind of a general show about that and some of Marlon's other passions like track and field and what it's like to be a college athlete. So Marlon, maybe you could just tell people, why now and what you hope to share with people.
Why now? I think really for me, I love college football. I think one of the things that anybody that knows me knows that I probably talk more about Ohio State football than I probably do about Buffalo Bills football. I have a shirt that I'll have to go find that says "I bleed scarlet and gray." My wife always calls me like a walking billboard for the Buckeyes. So it just made sense, right? There's so many other shows that talk about the Bills and the 53-man roster that's coming up and what it looks like. And they do a great job. So we wanted to kind of fill the void of what it looks like to talk about college football and really talk about what it looks like if you've watched the Florida that Netflix documentary and what it looks like in that atmosphere, like really try to give a new perspective of what it's like of really big time college football athletics and kind of give you a peek under the hood of what it is, how you get there, what is expected of those athletes, and share some of my own experiences, bring in guys that I played with and get their own perspective of what it was like, and really kind of give everyone a new show to kind of talk about it and drum up and also not forgetting that we also have UV in our backyard and what that looks like, and talk about some of those stories and how we got Khalil Mack. That would be really interesting to figure out how he came here, but definitely just really give us a peek under the hood of what it's like about big time college athletics and rank who's the best college athletic program of all time. I mean, I'm biased,
Well, no one's perfect, Marlon. Swamp Kings is the name of the new Netflix doc, and it's really interesting. And
my dad is a Gator alum. My dad went there when Steve Spurrier was a player. He's a walking billboard.
I'm assuming your dad probably wouldn't have partaken in a lot of the activities that
he would not have. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it.
I love your dad. Your dad was not. Yeah, okay. So, Marlon, when we were talking yesterday, can you just give me some of the names of the guys you played with on the '90s Buckeye team?
Oh man, I mean, that roster we had was pretty loaded. I went to high school, so I'll start with this. I went to high school and was the high school quarterback of the Patriot first round receiver Terry Glenn. So we started back when we were like 15, 16 years old, and then I got to Ohio State, and there was Joey Galloway and Chris Sanders and Eddie George and Raymond Harris and Corey Stringer and Orlando Pace and Sean Springs, and I can go on and on and on about the amount of talent, first round talent that I played with on a day-to-day basis, and how it helped prepare me to even just make the transition from college to the NFL. But it's just going to be pretty cool to just really talk about and share some of those stories, and just really kind of say, hey, these are guys that I thought might have had careers, guys that you never heard of that really made some really big impacts, and then just talk about some of the guys that I went to high school with in Ohio. Stuff like Kajana Carter was a Columbus kid. He went to Westerville North and ended up going to Penn State, and we all thought he might come to Ohio State, and he's like, nope, I'm going to Penn State, and had a monster day against us that made Happy Valley such an unhappy place for me. Sharing some of those stories and some of those experiences that we went through, and just talking about Ohio football and how different it is, and even some of the things that I've seen in Pennsylvania football and California football, and parade All-Americans, and how you overcome all those things and figure out how to play at a high level, really is going to be fun to talk about, and really get people talking about it. So I'm excited to just talk about college football.
And full disclosure, I am not a Ohio State Buckeye fan. The show is going to be Scarlet and Gray. The background for the show, I've ceded the ground to the Division I college athlete and former NFL player, because he is definitely the star and the focus of the show. I am a diehard Notre Dame football fan. My father, I don't know if you know this, Marlon, my father went to a small college in New Hampshire called St. Anselm's, and they were the sister school of Notre Dame. It was a small Catholic school that didn't have a football program. But my dad adopted Notre Dame as his team, and my dad had some mental health challenges throughout his life, and he really identified with the Notre Dame football team as like his. There were three things in this world that he loved. He loved Notre Dame football, one, probably me second, and my mom third, and then the United States, the country, God, country, Notre Dame, all that. So my dad passed away 13 years ago now, and I would watch 80s Notre Dame with him. The Tony Rice year when they won the national championship. We were at the Notre Dame USC game in 1988. The number 1 versus number 2. We had a great conversation with Jeff Burris, who hopefully will join us, Marlon, about the 93 Notre Dame team who got robbed of the national championship when they beat Charlie Ward in Florida State and then lost the next week to Boston College, like we talked about on this show. And then when I suffered through the Charlie Weiss era, who I semi-blame for helping my dad pass away early because he took so many of those losses so difficult. But since my dad passed away, I've kind of reconnected with Notre Dame football, and it's my link to him, and it kind of keeps his memory alive. I will be in my basement recording the show in the shadow of Touchdown Jesus Fathead that I have all over my wall. So I look forward to having some back and forth with Marlon. Marlon and I can agree that we hate Michigan. I know Aaron Quinn from Cover One is a huge Michigan guy, but we can find some common ground there. But, this is not going to be just an Ohio State podcast. Obviously, we're going to focus quite a bit on Ohio State and Marlon's journey and his contacts and stories. But I'm going to bring some balance and some realism to the fact that the Buckeyes are constantly underachieve, frankly.
This is going to be fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun, especially since we talk about Notre Dame and what have they achieved.
Woo,
well,
here we go.
You know what? They've got the third most wins in the last 10 years of college football. But
here
you're
we go,
right,
folks.
But you're
it
right.
Starts right here.
Third most. Who's the first?
I believe it's either Alabama or Ohio State. You're right. And listen, I can't argue, playoff success. There's been a hard ceiling for Notre Dame football, but
I mean, you got to get to the playoffs.
Well, we've been there 2018, 2020, but it didn't work out real well. But here we go. Saturday showed me they played Navy in Ireland, and I know it's Navy, and we respect Navy obviously for their service, etc. But the quarterback of Notre Dame, Sam Hartman, is legit. And it's the missing piece that they haven't had in forever. Probably the best quarterback Notre Dame's had since Brady Quinn. And I'm ready to go.
I couldn't tell that you were ready to go.
And I'm fired up. I'm more excited now because I was worried that we were going to get drubbed on September 23rd by Ohio State, but not now.
Well, let me throw this in there too, folks. You're getting a taste of what it's going to be like. It's going to be a lot of fun with these guys. And you mentioned Jeff Burris. Yes, we did have him on. One of the features. I don't know how exactly you're going to do this, but I've spoken with both of you separately and now together, but Jeff is now a coach at Louisiana, and we've had Marlon knows a lot of guys that are currently still in college football. Don Beebe we had on. He's the head coach at Shadwell State D3, but one team that contends in his conference every year. My friend Brad Lamb his son is at UNC Charlotte. There's a lot of other Buffalo Bills connections that are still in college football that you said you were going to mention. But when I was with the Bills, I was always struck by road games when we were on the bus or on the plane, and the passion that these players still had for where they played college football. One particular year, I think it was 05 or 06, you guys could tell, but we had Nate Clements, Ohio State guy, and Anthony Thomas, a Michigan guy. They were playing each other 1 versus 2. We rented out, had a whole meeting room. That's where the meal was. And we watched that game. It was amazing. And then back and forth between Clements and Thomas, and Ohio State won the day. But that's a huge, unbelievable memory for me. But you guys are you're going to crush it. I can't wait to hear it myself, and for the Cover One people to hear it all as well.
I'm excited. I can't wait. And don't bring up that 03, because I think that's when we lost to Florida that year. So
yeah, sure was. Yeah, 06 was the was kind of the game of the century.
06.
That was the
Bo Schembechler just died.
And I actually
right?
have a really funny story that I'll save for our show, Marlon, about that 06 Michigan. You know the story, Michigan Ohio State game.
Save it.
Yeah, I will definitely save it.
Show. It's really good. Yeah.
So we're gonna sign off here live on YouTube. And hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode.
And how I'm obviously on Cover One, but have you seen the schedule yet?
We're not quite sure yet. We're gonna record today.
Twitter X.
X, not Twitter anymore. So we're gonna have a rollout, and I know Cover One's excited to introduce Marlon, as the newest member of the team, and you look for that this week. And then Don and I will be back with an interview with Joe Miller that we just completed. We'll have that on Sunday. And then we have IK
and Impali.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have Brian Mormon, Robert Royal. Brad Post was a mascot for the team, the first ever Billy Buffalo. Now he's in Denver. The funniest stories about doing ESPN commercials, and a guy from the league office, Bill Castro. We're going to talk to someone who was actually at the league office, Grand Central, to hear. But this is about your show.
No, we're all good.
I can't wait to hear it. Let's see it.
Marlon, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'll see you later tonight, buddy.
Teary-eyed.
Thanks for joining us, bud.
Thanks, Rick.